This episode contains conversations surrounding depression, suicidal thoughts. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to this season of Alter Ego. We are starting season 1 with the topic of addiction in Butler County. Conversations on the physical side of addiction, trauma, the neuroscience, mental health, and stigma surrounding addiction. Experts, resources, and stories from people who have fought addiction head-on. I am your host, Laura Krigo. Let's keep the conversation going. Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. For a long time, I suffered with depression and anxiety. I had tried therapy before, but struggled finding a therapist I connected with until I found BetterHelp. That's why I am so excited to share BetterHelp's mission to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, because finding a therapist can be hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online. Remote therapy sessions, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. Click the link in description and receive 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. And by clicking that link, you support this channel. Plus, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. I was struggling for a long time, and BetterHelp was where I found my therapist, Whitney, who I still see weekly for almost 2 years now. So, if you're struggling like I was, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in description or go to betterhelp.com/alterego. That's betterhelp.com/alterego. There's no better time than now to start your mental health journey. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. Hello, happy Monday. Welcome to another episode of Alter Ego. So today I'm sitting down with Dawn Halle and Amy Cirelli. These two ladies were so wonderful to sit down and talk with. I want to really get right to this episode, but a few things I've been wanting to share with you all is I'm starting to get a little bit more into my personal journey with mental health. And while I have so much still to share, I would really love to hear from all of you. If there's anyone out there who wants to come on and talk, even if it's anonymous, you can definitely have anonymity. Send me a message on our Alter Ego Podcast Instagram. So it's Alter Ego Podcast. Send me a direct message on there. I will see it. Include your email, phone number, and let's find a time to talk. I'd love to hear from you, because what we're talking about here is human connection. We are talking about a lot of situations where we feel alone, but we're not alone. So if you have something that you'd like to share, something you'd like to talk through, reach out to me. And possibly it's something that I can get an expert to come back on and chat with you as well. If you're looking for the resources, go to alter-eagle.com. You can go on there and you can see all the episodes. And as we start to build our resources and our affiliates and our sponsors, we will have all of that information on there. So now let's just get to our episode. Okay. This is why we're so great. We can multitask.
Listen, I'm all about that.
I am all about the multitask. Be like, can't do it? I'll do it. Just let me do it.
You ask me to do one thing, I'm like, something's wrong.
Yeah, I need more. Okay, let's do it. Let's get it started. Today I'm sitting down with Dawn Halle.
Yes, you got it.
And Amy Cirelli. So Dawn is the Senior Clinical Director at Glade Lutheran Services. She received her Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Crime, Law and Justice from Penn State University. Wicked smart. She then went on to complete her master's degree from the University of Pittsburgh in Health and Rehabilitation Counseling with a certificate in assistive technology. Okay. And we're going to keep going. She's a licensed professional counselor, as well as a certified rehabilitation counselor and a certified clinical trauma professional. She is trained in parent-child interactive therapy and is finishing up her training in teacher-child interaction training. Dawn has been in the human service field for over 15 years, where she has spent her time in both private and public sectors servicing children, adults, and families from various walks of life. Through her experiences, Dawn has deepened her passion for understanding how mental health and drug addiction are interwoven. She continues to explore the many facets that play into the co-occurrence including but not limited to trauma, disability, personal experiences, and biomechanics. She is a wife, mom, and professional who is passionate about helping people see the best in themselves and explore the potential for their lives. She has a love for the community she works, lives, and plays in, and has the privilege to sit on several community boards and committees. I feel like that needs this. Okay. Holy crap. I need to go back to school and get another degree. Every time I sit down with people, I'm like, I need to go back to school. I need to learn something.
I've been busy.
Good for you. Oh my goodness. Okay.
That's that multitasking.
We were having a conversation about multitasking. And who knows, we might get back into that later. Sitting to my right is Amy, is a mental health specialist at Butler County Human Services and a co-chair of the Butler County Suicide Coalition. She received her Bachelor of Science in Psychology from Slippery Rock University and has worked in Butler County in the human services field for over 15 years. 15 years. Okay, both of you. Amy is a certified QPR, so question, persuade, refer, suicide prevention trainer. We're going to have to dig into that. Okay. Prior to working at Butler County Human Services, she was a case manager working with individuals with significant mental illnesses in the community. She then worked as a case manager in a transitional housing program, assisting women with developing the skills needed to maintain independent housing. With her vast experience in the human services system, Amy has seen great successes as well as aspects that could be improved upon. Amy is working with the Suicide Coalition to bring more mental health and suicide awareness to the Butler community. Bravo. Amy, you're getting it. I had to do it both times. When I was looking at both of your bios yesterday, and I think the most impressive thing to me, obviously, and as we get older, right, I don't feel like I've been doing something for as long as I've been doing it. Like my previous career, when I got to 10 years, I was like, oh, wow, I've been doing this for 10 years. And then I got to 12 years. It flies by. And I'm sure you can both look back at when you started this and how much you have grown from the beginning till now. Something I want you to think about, and you don't have to talk about it now, but is how you take care of yourself, right?
To talk about that.
So we need to talk about that. So we are going to get to that. But first, I kind of want to start with Amy. I want to hear, not Amy. Nope, we decided it was Dawn. Sorry, Amy.
But it was out.
Amy's like, wait, we decided it was Dawn. Talk about your why, your personal connection, if any, how deep do you want to go? And why is it that you are so passionate about working in this field?
Yeah. I think the question that I think a lot of us always say is like, how much time do you have? Right. Because I could probably give my whole life story. But
we have an hour.
I better talk fast. I'm a fast talker anyway, so that's good. Growing up, I had a lot of natural protective factors. I grew up in an area that was white suburban, neighborhood and really great school district. And I grew up academically strong, involved in sports and Girl Scouts. I mean, anything you name it, I was really involved in. And I had parents that were really supportive of that. I always found myself as the person that people would go to. I would be in the lunchroom and I'd be like, oh, that person's by themselves. I need to go sit with them, and people naturally would come to me and talk to me and try to find support or guidance or just a listening ear. My parents were very open with me growing up about their life and their experiences and the hardships that they did and the choices that they made. And my dad was a really big inspiration, and it's not my story to tell with him, but it wasn't easy for him growing up. And for where he's at right now as an executive director, in his position, it's inspiring to kind of say, like, you can come from really tough areas and hard trials, trauma, really hard choices, and you can become something of yourself. And you if you have the right supports and the right things, and you want to make a change, it's there. But for me, I would look around when I was younger, and I would say, like, man, I just, my heart breaks for people. You know, I wasn't clueless to like the privilege I had. You know, definitely things were hard at times, but I was definitely privileged to have the life and the home that I did. And I'm very blessed, and I don't take that for granted. I never did. You know, but I always, like I said, my heart broke for people. And so you often found my house as the place where you need something to eat, you come to our house. You need a warm home, roof over your head, you come to our house. You need somebody to love you, you come to our house. And that's really just the standard that my parents had always had. And I took that with me, and I ran with that. And as I got into high school, I had some really tough situations that came up. I ended up having knee surgery on both my knees. I had surgery on my wrist, and I was hit by a car. So it was really within 4 years, I had experienced a lot of trials that really took me out of sports and interactions and different things. So I started making choices that I really probably normally wouldn't have made. I needed to find something to help me fill that time and feel like I'm still part of something. So I got into other groups. One of my best friends at the time, she personally had lost her dad and from suicide, and I oftentimes saw her self-harming, and I would watch that, and I would hurt for her, and I would see it around that. I'd like, why do people make these choices? I want to help them. Like, there's other answers, you know. But then I found myself in my own pits and making choices that if I didn't have my parents, I would have really continued down a path that I may not have ever came out of, or it would have been a really long journey and a road ahead. But I had those natural supports, and I had that good support system in my church and in my family that allowed me to get through some of those and understand different natural consequences that came from that. And when I went into college, I got into really bad relationships and I was successful. I was good at college. I was good at doing everything, and I still had really good people. But again, my big question is, why do people do what they do? Like, why? At some point, you know, when we're younger, we're babies. We're all born the same, right? Like, babies are innocent. But at some point, something splits. And that's always stuck with me. Like, at some point, why did I make those choices that I did? At what point did that drive me to go down that path, or other people, and they can't get out of it? So I really explored that. And for me, that's where it took off, is at some point, something splits in people that their paths kind of veer off. Because babies aren't born that first day and like, I'm feeling anxious and, you know, I want to use drugs. Like, that's not what happens. And so I really got into it. And I actually was going in towards like the FBI. That was my path. I wanted to be a criminal profiler and really investigate people's choices. And that I was going for police academies, and I was really, that was my path. I was going to law school, I was studying for it. And at the last minute before I was going to law school, something clicked in me. And honestly, it was not my own decision. Because like I said, I had gone to, sorry, I bumped your mic. I went to...
Didn't hear it.
Okay.
It's fine.
I was planning on going to all these different police academies, and I was waiting to hear back from them. And something inside of me, and I truly believe it was God just really speaking to me. And I was really involved in the church and my faith. And you're not just going to go and arrest people. You're not going to go and be part of just locking people up, or, you know, and those parts are really important, right? You need people to have all those different roles. But I really had this calling in my life. Like, you're going to do more. You need to be a part of the solution. You've seen that there's problems here. You see that there's disconnects in people who struggle with addiction. You see that people have their difficulties with their mental health, and you need to be the hands and feet. And so last minute, I applied to grad school. And 2 days before classes started, I was finding myself switching gears to go to grad school and get into more of the counseling profession versus the criminal justice side of it. And like, wouldn't you know, like 2 days later, they all called me and said, hey, we want you in the police academy. I'm like, well, I just paid thousands of dollars, so not going that path.
I've changed my mind.
Yeah, it's not happening. Thanks though. But for me, it's like, I can't really say it's like it was one thing, right? Like, I had my own personal experiences. I had family, I had friends. I saw people hurting, and I didn't understand it, but I wanted to know more, and I wanted to explore, because I knew where I could have been and where I was. And I was so close to that edge. Had I just put 2 feet over versus 1 foot, it would have been a different path. I wouldn't be where, all those things you talked about. I mean, it's not by the grace of God that I'm where I'm at today. And I don't take those things for granted. And for me, I know I've learned over time, like how to do things, how to cope, how to, be comfortable in my own skin and my own body, and how to have that calm spirit. And that's so beneficial. And I know how amazing that is. And I want everybody to feel that way. Honestly, like I'm like a cheerleader. Like that's my path. You want a hype girl? I'm your hype girl. I am your hype girl.
I think you did tell me that when we first spoke. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for me, like I want the best in everybody. Like I want you to have the potential, like that, how you were designed to be as humans. And so that's where it came from. For me, it was like, that's available to everybody. And if you don't have that loved one, you don't have that family, I'll be that for you. And you need someone to support you and walk you through those steps, I'll be there for you. So it's a lot of different paths that have taken me to where I'm at. And I continue to see people change, and I see it work. I see having those conversations and sitting across women who have been in some really tough situations, or children who have come from tough homes, and people in the depths of their addiction, be successful in their recovery and their mental health and their addiction, that they're actually finding peace in their home and in their life. And sometimes people just need grace. So that, I don't know, it's like a long answer, but it's just very convoluted. It's not clear. One path.
Something you said is when you were talking about if you just taken 2 more steps, right, you would have gone down a totally different path, but it doesn't mean that you couldn't have ended up here.
Absolutely.
If this was like your destiny. I do believe that, when you're in something really nasty and someone's like, everything happens for a reason, and you're like, I'm going to punch you in your face.
And that's actually
and I've never punched anybody, but I want to hit you right now.
Yeah.
I just want to smack you on the shoulder and be like, that's not helpful. Right. But hindsight is 20/20. When you look back, I mean, people say it to me all the time. It's so interesting. Everyone's like, why'd you move back to Butler? They get really almost like, they're like, I need to know, like there's an answer. And I'm like, again, how much time do you have? But also it's like, everywhere that I've gone, it wasn't the plan, right? If you really look at it, you start making a plan. And then as you start to go on that plan, it's like you're on a road trip, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, look, there's a Chipotle at this exit. Let's get off. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like I know that sounds
no, and honestly, like I've shared, and it's not for everybody. Everyone's paths and their belief systems are different. But for me, like I said, my faith has always been a very pivotal part for me in my life. So I've made many times where I'm like, this is my path. This is what I'm going to do, and I know God's got a different plan for me. And, they always, there's that saying like, God's laughing at our own plans that we plan for ourselves. And I truly believe it because, again, I thought I was going to police academy. I was going to go work for the FBI.
I could see that. Can't you see that though? Yeah. I could see her working for the FBI.
I still think it would be cool.
Hey, you're still here.
I know. I have a 4-year-old. So for me, it's like, it's that time away from home. If I was just me, I probably would have, maybe pursued it more. But family is really important. So
absolutely.
Yeah. But I do think like God, like that's where it's a big part for me with my faith. And, I've tried to make many times my own plans, and I know I get smacked in the face.
Of course. As we all do.
Yeah.
As we all do. Amy.
Okay. Oddly enough,
do we have the same story?
No, but there are similarities.
You're like copy paste.
Right. I'm like just what Dawn said. Oddly enough, I have also always been very interested in trying to figure out like, why people do the things they do, why I do the things I do. I still don't know sometimes. And I also in college was thinking about being a criminal profiler for the FBI.
We did not plan this.
What is happening?
We did not know this. This is a new news for both of us.
Okay, so side note, know something about me as a person. I'm the person that's like, you should do it. You should do all of it.
You can be my hype girl.
You should do all of it. Make it happen.
So we'll go to like the police academy together maybe
later. Let's do it. We're hitting that age limit probably though soon.
Right.
See, I'm gonna just interject here. There is a nun in England who's in her 80s. I think she's 83 now, who does Ironmans. So, and I use that as a reference because that's a really hard physical and mental thing. You know, when I worked in fitness, a lot of times we'd be at a point in class and I'd say 10% of what you're doing is physical right now and 90% is mental. And people would look at me and I'm like, I'm not saying that just by saying it's 10 doesn't mean it's not hard. That's not hard, but that 90% is a huge part of what you are doing right now in this moment. And obviously, yes, you've got to be mindful of not spreading yourself too thin, right? To add things to your plate. But I don't know. I'm one of those people that's like, hey, you know, so let's say you have a daughter, right? And let's say
I have a son, but
you have a son. Mm-hmm. Okay, you have a son. You don't have a daughter? Did I hear that accidentally?
I have a 4-year-old son.
She said 4-year-old, and I think my brain, I don't know why my brain did that. Anyways, okay, so you have a son, and let's say, you know, when he's older, right? And you're like, maybe I just go get that degree just to, anyways, we're going to put that.
Oh, I'm all about it.
We're going to go back.
You could pay me be a student. I'd go to school all day.
And then I'll have you on the podcast and I don't know if I'll still be here in 15 years, but we'll see. You never know. You never know. I kind of see myself being a, like Delilah on the radio.
Oh, I can see you doing that. You have that good like demeanor.
You know, just that. Who are you thinking about today? Sorry, go ahead.
I can see you doing it though.
Someone asked me to do a Delilah bit, so I've been listening to her a lot, and I'm like trying to work on her voice and her inflections, and it's interesting though. Like, no, because you had said that you also thought about going into a background in career, like or in crime,
and I think it's because there is a lot. You know, when you think about like serial killers and like why are they doing this, and so I always had an interest in like why people do what they do, and so that's why I went to school for psychology, and then I had a testing class, like psychological testing, and I loved it. I loved testing. So when it was getting time to graduate, I applied for grad school at a couple schools to be a school psychologist, and I didn't get into any of them. So I'm like, okay, that's not going to happen right now. So I got a job as a case manager, a blended case manager. And so I figured, this is a good place to start. It gets good experience. And I think that's really where I started to get, I've always liked helping people, but I think that's where I really started to enjoy helping people with like severe mental illness, because you get to know them. And previously a lot of people see those populations is like, oh, there's something wrong with them, but they have a mental illness, but they're a regular person just like anyone else. They want the same things in life that everyone else does, and so I just really enjoyed helping them meet their goals and getting to know them. And they're, like you had mentioned, it can be hard work. And there's a lot of stressful things that happens, but there's also a lot of awesome things that happen. Mm-hmm. And people just like, reaching goals that they set for themselves and doing well, and like maybe even being able to do things they didn't think were ever possible. So I think those things, like, they keep you going, I think. And I just loved being a case manager. I don't know if that's like a job that I loved it.
Do you want to come work with me? We need more.
There's a lot of things happening here today.
Right. And then the same with working with homeless. I worked with homeless women in a transitional housing program at the Lighthouse Foundation. And it was the same thing. Like, these women had been through so much, just, with their families or struggling with drug addiction or mental health, but they still had they want the same things everyone else wants. And I loved being able to help them work towards that. So, and now I'm in this role. I don't work with anyone really directly like that anymore, but I feel I'm able to work with more of like the programs who are providing those services to people. So I can help support the staff. Like, I can help support case managers now who are doing what I did. So that's...
Yeah. Okay. I know when I talked to Samantha DeJoseph from Crossroads, she sort of does something similar where she now oversees case managers. Do a lot of the people that work under you come to you whenever something really heavy is like going on, and how do you sort of approach that?
We have, I mean, a lot of times like I'll get an email from like someone like Dawn might email me and be like, we have this situation going on. We don't know what to do. And like, we'll try to do whatever we can to like brainstorm, think of things that maybe like haven't been tried yet. Like if there's funding available to help with, getting something that would make the situation better, we try to fund it. It's really a lot of working together with everyone, because sometimes getting a group of people together, you might think of ideas. Like we just had a situation where a family is in need. They have a language barrier and cultural barriers. And we had like a group of people trying to figure out like, how can this person get services when an interpreter isn't available? And someone ended up thinking of like, well, maybe you could try using like Google Translate sometimes. And if that works well, maybe we could help get them, like a phone or something that is specifically for that. And like, I would have never thought of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like this person thought of it. And so sometimes it is kind of like, it seems so simple, like Google Translate, but like that's something no one had thought of yet. And it's something that's accessible, and it might not fix everything, but it could make a big difference.
It could help bridge that gap. Yeah. Well, it takes a village.
Right.
So
it's
I mean,
like a lot of times it's a lot of collaboration with other people to try to figure out the best solution we can get to. Sometimes we can't find a solution. Sometimes we can't find a solution to everything, but we can do what we can. Sometimes we're able to like solve a problem, and that's great, but it really takes a lot of working together.
Yeah. So Dawn, when we talked a little bit more about what you do as senior clinical director at Glade Run, like ins and outs, your goals for the future, but when we're breaking down extremes, we kind of talked about that. So you have younger kids and you've got incarcerated parents, and there's like a trauma connection there.
Yeah. So
I didn't really ask a question.
You didn't. I
sort of was like, I just want you to talk about it.
Yeah. So like, within my role, very similar with, Amy, I'm kind of at that more bird's eye view at times, but supporting our staff. I have managers and supervisors and our direct staff under us. But I still see clients. I think it's just really important for myself, best practice to still be involved at some capacity to kind of keep your feet wet. And so for me, it's nice because I can still see what's really happening and as you're evolving, and we use a lot of things around evidence-based treatment. So it's all things that are researched and focused. It's not just like, let's just throw mud at the wall and just see, because our due diligence is we can't do harm, right? We don't want to do harm. And that's where you get a lot of that good practice on things. But with our staff and our teams, part of my role is program development and really thinking through where the needs are and how can we bridge those gaps, and specifically with populations. So since I've come on board, and I've been at Glade Run for almost 6 years now, we've been able to open up providing services at Head Start programs. So we're talking 3, 4, 5-year-olds. And then one of my other initiatives that are newer in the last 2 years is actually adding on a forensic program, which is working within Butler County Prison. So I still get to, it's kind of nice because it's my passions, right? That's everything that we talked about before, is like helping individuals with incarceration and digging into that. And I did a lot of training in the prisons when I was going through college and stuff. So it was cool because I can kind of put it all together within my role. And that's what I get to do. I get to do a lot of program development. I get to look out there and see, how can we support our staff and what are people's passions and what do they want to do and all right, let's do it. Let's figure it out. Where, Glade Run does so much. And it isn't like a Glade Run play, but we do a lot for families. We have family wellness programs. We have, programs that we're going into the homes to support families. We have programs where we're going in the schools and providing school-based therapy. We're focused on the family. That's really the biggest unit. And it is just so important. So when we're talking about these extremes, and I don't know how much you want me to get into it, but like I said, I could talk all day.
Well,
but
what's important, I think, just to kind of hit your basis, like if we're looking at like a triangle, right? Just hitting all those corners.
Yeah. So, sorry, I was taking my bracelets off. They were getting a little noisy.
Oh, that's okay.
if we're starting with adolescents, right, and kids, and I know a lot of the people you've had on your show already have really talked a lot about that childhood trauma. I think it's just so important to start there because when you're talking about kids and you're talking about mental health and we're connecting this with drug and alcohol, it really starts with your childhood experiences. When you're having adverse child experiences and the childhood trauma that comes on, and I know Alyssa talked a lot about, trauma can be anything, right? And it's your own experience and what that looked like for you. It's 100% true, right? And most of the time for individuals as adults, as we get older, we've all experienced, about 60% of us have experienced some type of childhood trauma. But then when you take it into the prison setting, about 97% of the people who are incarcerated have experienced childhood trauma. So you can kind of see where that ends up. And that childhood trauma has a tendency to bring on anxiety, depression, psychosis, a lot of other types of extreme mental health and those SMI diagnoses, that you were talking about, Amy. And so as a child who experiences that in the home, and let's say they have a really poor upbringing where maybe mom and dad's not involved, maybe mom and dad use, drugs, and they come home and now there's abuse that are happening, or neglect, or verbal abuse. It doesn't have to be physical abuse, but that kid now is trying to develop these, protective factors, and their brain's still developing, and I know, like, you've had so many people talking about this, but it's the brain. The childhood brain is developing. It is not there yet. And you add any type of trauma experience, the brain remaps itself because it's trying to protect itself in that fight or flight moment. And as they continue getting older, if they don't have the proper supports and protective mechanisms to help heal parts of those pathways to correct it, they're going to use and try to find things to find healing outside of their natural ability. And that's where you get individuals who start to experience with drugs and alcohol. And it takes them outside of themselves, and it becomes a seesaw. There's a seesaw that happens in our bodies of pain and pleasure. And kids naturally understand that, whether they realize it or not. And it becomes this whole circle as we talk about parents in incarceration. And if we start kind of go back over here to the prison, most of those individuals had 90% of them childhood trauma. That means it hasn't been resolved. Maybe it hasn't been worked through. So theirs actually started when they were a child. What happened to them, right? What was it like when their parents, what was their upbringing? What was their family dynamics? And you start to see like how this circle kind of, if they're not working through that family systems and really resolving some of those things that are happening in their life, they then take that back home. Mm-hmm. And then that becomes the child's experience. So the adult's experience becomes the child's experience, and it becomes a thing that happens within the home that becomes a cycle. And it's because of that healing, that lack of healing that's happened. Mm-hmm. And so I'm so passionate. I'm so blessed the fact that we at Glade Run can work on the family systems as a whole, not just one piece, And I think people think that like they're like kids, like 3 and 4 year olds, mental health. And it's shocking to them when I tell them, yeah, we get kids that are 4 years old expressing, and I know, Amy, you're going to talk about all about like about suicide, and they don't get it.
I told someone that yesterday, and they're like, "How do they know? Where did they learn that?" And I'm like, until we're having these conversations, and at the end of the day, I think it's like, this is what's happening.
It is.
It's what's happening, and there's so many layers to it because it's situational.
It is. It's situational. It's again, kind of like when you were kind of reading my bio, like it's how you grow up. It's your own body mechanisms, and there is genetics that play into that. So that's where it does become hard because you can't fit everything into a box, and there's not one way to do anything or to approach things. But when you understand the dynamics of the human body and how we interact and the foundations that add a basis, we need that natural part of safety, and if you don't have that natural safety and hierarchy of needs where we're talking about, I have the ability to have clothes on my back, and I have food in my stomach, and I have a ceiling over my head or a roof over my head, you're not going to be able to do those higher level things of pleasure and interaction and be successful at things that you really want to do because you can't get those basis needs. And so it does become individual, but at the end, we all have those basic human needs that we have to have fulfilled. People do, they say like, whoa, what's going on? Like, you have kids? And I'm like, yeah, that is our reality. And it's scary to think about. And we have two choices. We can do something about it or we can ignore it. And we can't ignore it. We have a, like I said before, like for me, it's like there's an issue. Like I need to do something about it. I need to be a part of the solution.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I am the solution, but I need to be a part of it. I need to sit at the table and have the conversations.
So let's just go right to that then with you and what you do. When we were talking about kids who are 3, 4, 5 years old and they're saying that they want to, how is it said that they want to take their own lives? They want to end their lives. They don't want to.
I usually say contemplating suicide or thinking about suicide.
And they're using the word suicide.
I mean, sometimes I'm not really, I work more with adults. We have a mental health specialist who deals with just the children's system. I'm in the adult system, so I don't really have the interaction with the children's system like Dawn does. But as far as adults go, I mean, there are people who will just say like, I'm thinking about killing myself. Like they just put it out there. And I think, suicide isn't the problem. Suicide is something that the person is seeing as a solution to the problem. So there is something more going on in their life, something they're experiencing. Maybe they've been experiencing it for a long time that is leading them to think that suicide is the way out of this. This is how I solve this problem. And that's what's so hard about it, is because then the mission becomes, how do you convince them like, no, there is people out there who can help. There are people who care about you. And it can be difficult, especially if the person maybe doesn't tell anyone. So it can be really difficult.
Yeah. And if it is someone that, you were talking a lot about your upbringing and how you had this family, that supported you, and your parents were there to interject. And if they hadn't been, you could have gone down a very different path.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times this comes up. It comes up with people. It's like, lean on your family, lean on your friends. And there's some people that don't have that.
Right.
Which is why we have these resources. But then it's also like, if they don't have that and they're not used to asking for help or not used to talking about what's going on inside their heads and how they're feeling, then it's trying to get them to say, well, hey, go to these people that you've never met before,
right.
and
like, tell them everything.
and tell them everything, and trust that they're not going to judge you. They're not going to push you away. They're not going to. So that's what we're trying to do here, is saying that those resources are available. There are people in this community who are, it's judgment free. And the more we talk about our experiences and putting them out there and saying, like, that's a thing for me. Like, I've had suicidal ideation twice in my life. Very, very strong. Like the first time it was like I was holding the bottle of pills and I had a glass of water in my hand, like, and I was crying, and I hadn't written a letter. I hadn't, it was just, I wanted to, and I have to think back to that because the feeling were different. Both times it was very different, but there in that moment, it was a very strong sense of not wanting to exist. It didn't feel like it was, I just didn't want to exist anymore. Like I just couldn't exist in my reality. Abusive relationship, going through a lot with that. And, I almost failed out of college. It was junior year of college. Like I was a theater major and that was my passion, and I couldn't even get it together to be prepared for auditions or my classes that I was passionate about. So been there, right?
Yep.
And so it's sort of this, for whatever reason, there was a voice that was just like, hey, put down the glass, just walk out of this room. And I remember walking out and telling my roommate, and it was interesting, it was an interesting conversation. It was sort of this, wow, I was wondering what was wrong with you. And I was sort of like, you're my friend.
Right.
Like, and I knew in that moment, she's not going to be the one I was able to identify, like, she's not going to be the person that's going to help me get out of this and figure this out or listen or make me feel better. I need to find someone to talk to.
Right.
And it was a professor, and she walked me to the mental health facility, So
we're thankful for her, honestly.
Yeah.
We get to have you here today.
Well, thank you. And then that was the catalyst for me getting to Butler. I was in it again. And that time it was very, very, it wasn't I didn't want to,
Right.
I just it wasn't a very big part of feeling failure. So what we're trying to do is let people know that you're not alone when you're
Right.
feeling that way. And I think that's one of the
Definitely not.
biggest things that happens is that you just feel very much alone. You also feel like a sense of, it's like, that it's not the way it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's also like, it's almost a sense of control too, right? There's something that you can control.
Right.
To me, there was an element of like, this is something I can control.
Right.
I can't control anything else that's going on right now, no matter how hard I try. This I can control. But that's not the way that it is, though. Like
Until you can't control it anymore.
Until you cannot
Right.
control it anymore, and it's an overwhelming thing. So, whenever someone comes to you with that, what's the next step, right? I mean, you said you can obviously tell them like there are people that care about you. We're here for you, all these things, but how are we, other than making them not feel alone, like what else is it that we can do, right?
Well, that's actually, you had mentioned the QPR question, persuade, refer. That's actually what that training is about.
Okay.
And the training is geared towards anyone. Like you don't have to be a mental health professional. You can be anyone. And they teach you how to recognize the signs. Like your friend said, oh, I was wondering what was wrong with you. Like, recognize the signs that something might not be right. And then how.
Not that it matters, but like, it's.
Don't say to them, oh, seems like there's something wrong with you.
Because then you're like, there's something wrong
Right.
with me.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's even worse. That exacerbates the situation.
Right.
So,
And so
that's what it did.
teaches you after you recognize those signs, how to talk with the person. A lot, like asking someone, hey, are you thinking about killing yourself, is a very scary question to ask. And then like, oh my gosh, what if they say yes? Then what do I do? And so it kind of goes through all of that. And it talks about like when you're talking to the person, which we go over what to say as far as like how to ask and what not to say. Like saying, oh, there's something wrong with you. Definitely falling under what not to say. And it sort of talks about like when this person's talking to you, like what should you do? And really most of the time, like they just want someone to listen to what they're going through. They're not looking for you to fix their problems or to solve anything for them. They need someone to talk to. So really just listening and validating their feelings and hearing what they've been going through, while also like letting them know like, I'm here for you. I care about you. And then the referral part of that is maybe saying something like, let's call like Glade Run tomorrow and make an appointment, or, hey, let's call the crisis line together so you can talk to someone. And so, or even saying like, okay, like when your first appointment, I'll come with you and I'll just like wait in the car for when you're done. Just sort of like doing a step-by-step, like, so you're with them through the whole process. Cause even just, like calling and making an appointment somewhere can be scary. And then going to the appointment, if you've never been in therapy before, you don't know what to expect. So like the whole process of getting started can be difficult, especially if it's someone who is also obviously struggling. So just being with that person through the entire, and they might say, I don't want you to come with me. And that's okay. Just say like, okay, if you change your mind, let me know. Or even after the appointment, if you didn't go with them, saying like giving them a text like, hey, how'd it go? To just show that person, not just with your words, but with your actions. Like, I really am here for you. I really do care.
Something we touch on this season is human connection.
Oh, it's so big.
So just having, like you said, someone to listen. And I've learned that a lot. Sometimes it just feels like word vomit, right? You just need to like get it out. It almost feels better that you're not the only one thinking these thoughts, that you can put it out and someone just listens to you. And I say that a lot. If someone starts talking to me, I'm like, hey, I'm just here to listen. I don't need to, if you don't want me to respond, I'm just going to listen, and I'm just going to be here for you in that capacity. If you want a response, do you want my opinion? Let me know. But otherwise, because I feel like that a lot of times, and it can be overwhelming to have people coming at you with their opinions.
Right.
And a lot of times opinions off from people who aren't working in this field are opinion based and what they would do in their experience. So it's good to go to the professionals. These two ladies, so kids, and I do apologize because I know we've talked so much about all of this, and I'm like, wait,
it's all connected. I mean,
yeah,
it really is.
because those kids, they grow up,
they become
and
the adults.
They're adults. Yeah,
they do. And that's the thing. Like, a professor of mine once kind of talked about. It's like, I was always adults. And he's like, if you don't focus on the kids, you're just gonna have adults and you just have children in adults' bodies. It's because their cognitive functioning starts to get delayed because they didn't heal what they needed to heal. Their mannerisms, their ability to think through things, and all of those things,
self-regulate.
All of that is just now in an adult-sized body, and that's what we see a lot of times in adults when we're working with them. And sometimes I hear staff like, man, I feel like I'm talking to a kid. I'm like, well, look at their history. Look what they never got a chance to work through. You have to approach some of these things as if you were working with an adolescent. You have to take those steps back to help them get to a point that they can function a little bit more on the level that their body appears, right? And because their functioning is not there for sure. It's interesting. But as we talk about kids and like, you're like, well, what do they say? Like, what does that look like? Sometimes you might say suicide, but they don't really talk about that. But it's more like, I don't want to wake up in the morning. I don't want to be here anymore. Or I don't feel loved. I don't have anybody at home. And, we assess for that. Every single time we meet with kids and parents, people get uncomfortable about it. But if we don't, and something happened, like, why didn't you do it? Why didn't you check? So we do it. We think it's so important. And we're not like, do you want to kill yourself? That's not how we're approaching your 4-year-old child.
Of course.
You know what I mean? But it's, how are you feeling today? What, and inappropriate. We have like feelings charts. We have all the pictures, all age appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really, how do you feel safe at home? What's home life for you? What was home life last night versus yesterday, or today or 3 weeks ago? Because it changes, right? And when you start to talk to kids about, wanting to be awake and what they want to do tomorrow, if they're talking about at 4 years old that they have nothing to look forward to, that's concerning. Because 4-year-olds are always coming up with something. They're always, generating. And it's cool because like I said, I have a 4-year-old. So it really hits home for me, even more so now than I think it did when I first started my career. I was always passionate about kids and understand it, but dang, it's hard when I get these incident reports. So we get a lot of information, then we actually report it back to Amy. So it's kind of cool in a way, but it's definitely a cycle of like how we share this information but the heaviness that we get on these kids and what they're experiencing in the home, and about having that they need to be hospitalized for having thoughts of suicide or attempts and abuse that's happening at home. I mean, my heart breaks more than it ever did before. And it's a little more personal, as much as it's not my kid, and I can definitely create those separations. You have to, as you talk about self-care, you have to create separations, but that's really like going back to how I was growing up. Like, I want everybody to have that love. Like, you deserve that. We don't deserve big things. Not everybody deserves like that basic human connection is so important, and we all deserve to have that at a very bare minimum. And that's really what it comes down to.
Well, yesterday I had Steve True in here, and he had said that something similar to something someone else said. It's interesting. Every time I sit down, people keep saying these things. I'm like, I've heard that. It just keeps connecting everything, but it's like seeing people and looking at them. If you see someone out in the community and maybe they look sad or maybe they look angry, sometimes you see an angry person, you might want to be like, I'm just going to let them continue on their way. But those interactions can be very powerful, and especially with children. Alyssa made this point that, if a kid is not paying attention in school or they're fidgeting or always wanting to go to the bathroom, whatever it might be, it doesn't mean that they're a bad seed or they're just, really, that's just it, right? It's not that. Mm-hmm. There's probably something more going on here, and how can we approach these situations with a little bit more compassion and understanding and, being grateful for where we are, right? We're able to understand that a lot of times when someone reacts a specific way to us, it probably has nothing to do with me. Mm-hmm. It has to do with something that they are dealing with. And I've experienced that. You'd be surprised, when I was in the fitness world, I would have people come to class and they're like, oh, this is therapy for me. And I've
Absolutely.
Been able to, feel better about myself. And then you'd have people that come in and you'd play a song and they would just lose it because you'd played some emotional song. Like, why would you play that song? How could you play that? And I'm like,
I don't know.
I didn't know it triggered you.
I didn't know that song was going to trigger you.
Yeah.
For me, it was a beautiful song about a beautiful moment, and it's something that connects us all. And I did not mean that, but I remember that experience. I remember that interaction, and I could feel how just like hurt this person was. And all I just kept thinking was, man, I hope she finds someone to talk to. Yeah. I really hope she finds someone to talk to. So we had mentioned a little bit about maybe statistics. See if that, okay. So, statistics. Do you have any statistics?
Yes. I actually just got, maybe 2 weeks ago, we get our statistics on Butler County residents who died by suicide from the coroner's office. And we get them, I can ask for them anytime during the year. I typically ask for them around June and then again in January to get the whole year previous. So this year in 2023, we lost 35 Butler County residents to suicide, which last year it was 19, or not last year, I'm sorry, 2022. It was 19, which is the lowest we've ever had. So we were very excited about that. And then in 2021, it had been 37, which was the highest we've ever had. So we had sort of the highest we've ever had, followed immediately the next year by the lowest we'd ever had. So I didn't know what to expect for 2023. But it's 35, which is less than 37, but is still,
that's a significant from 19.
Yeah, it's still way too many. I mean, 19 was too many. But we never want the number to go up. Ideally, it would always go down. But the reality is that's just not what's happening.
Okay. And we do talk a little bit about survivor suicide groups, what they provide and the importance.
We do have a group here in Butler. I brought my notes. It's run by Christy Knight, and it is the second and fourth Monday of each month from 6 to 7:30. And it's at the First United Methodist Church. And you do have to sign up, I believe, to attend, but I'm sure if you just showed up, she's not going to tell you to leave. You can stay. But that is a group for people who have lost a loved one to suicide. Family can attend, friends, romantic partners, anyone who has lost someone to suicide can come to this group. And it's just a support group for people who have gone through that experience. Because just like you had said that the experience of having suicidal ideations is very lonely, losing someone to suicide is also very lonely. A lot of times, there's shame around saying, oh, my son died by suicide. So they don't want to tell people. And then you feel, because no one's saying it, you think you're the only one. But that's absolutely not true. There are a lot of people who have lost a loved one to suicide. And, the Suicide Coalition will table at different events. And almost every time someone comes up to the table and talks about how they've lost a loved one to suicide. So there are way more people out there experiencing this than I think anyone realizes. And what's nice about the support group is that you get to meet some of these people who are experiencing the same kind of grief and have gone through the same kind of situation you have. And, you can share freely how you're feeling around them and make connections with them and just have someone in your life, a group of people who understand what you're going through.
And that's something that, even with addiction that we talk about is having those connections with people who understand like what you're feeling. And with a topic like suicide, I have a friend who I used to work with out in LA, and she committed suicide. And I remember when it was, none of us ever asked or know how. There was definitely a period of like, for some of us, for it to be finite, we wanted to know, like,
right.
How could she have even having had those thoughts like decades earlier, right? Mm-hmm. I still was like, it just didn't makes sense because I remember her she was an actress, and I still will see these commercials. She did one of those. I think it's State Farm is the one where like you can't be, like your parents, those commercials. Yeah. She was in one of those. Oh my. And every time I see them, I think of her. Like I don't see, like her commercial isn't out right now, but like it's online. Yeah. But just and so we did a Soul Cycle ride in memory of her. Mm-hmm. And myself and another instructor taught the class, and all these people came and we had pictures of her everywhere. And I remember just telling a story. And when we were together, we were always laughing, and she was always smiling. And I never would have, even though she was very open about her mental health struggles, about her journey with that. She was very open about it. She did a lot of volunteering and speaking, to a group that was out there for, suicide and like suicide prevention. And then, yeah, so it was one of those things where it's like, man, when was the last time I talked to her? And when was the last time and I think my advice to anyone is that, if you haven't talked to someone in a while, or if you haven't, or if you've noticed that someone's maybe like, people will post stuff online, right? All the time. I'm going to switch that in a minute because that turned off again. So when you start talking, I'm just going to boom, right? Just to give you a heads up.
Can I say something about that though?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Because I think one of the things you said was like, with her, she's open about her mental health, but it was like, whoa, like, no, I'm not saying nobody expected, but nobody expected it, right? And nobody saw that coming. And as we talk about like drugs and alcohol and mental health and how these things all tie together, that's the stigma, right? Like, well, that's not what I thought. That's not what I saw. Mm-hmm. But really at the end of the day, like any of this could be for anybody. And going back to like the suicide thoughts, like when you were talking about, like you had that ideation, it's not abnormal to think about maybe not being alive. People would be really, I think probably very shocked to look at the statistics of how often people have passive thoughts, and it comes and goes, but of like just not waking up and not wanting to do life or not wanting to do things, maybe not to the point that they have a plan, but how common it really is for people. So when you take that for the general population, and then you add people who have mental health, and you would never know, or maybe you do know, the best executive director of any type of company can have mental health. It's not special for certain people. And same with drug and alcohol. Like anybody has the potential that could be the path that could be happening and forging. And again, we talked about all these different things that happen, right? But like, I just think that that's such a big thing to talk about is, that's not what I thought. And that's what I saw. Like, but people don't choose that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think all of us knew that she had struggled for so long, but we saw her like winning.
Yeah, she was doing good. Yeah.
And it was this moment of like, she wasn't. Like, she was doing a really good job at making us think that she was okay.
It's a lot of work. That's exhausting for people to
exhausting.
Continue to be trying to keep it together. And on the outside, it looks like you're making these successes. You're doing all the right things, right? You're involved in, if you're, again, when we talk about drug and alcohol, you're involved in AA and you're supporting in the community. You have a support system, that what seems, and you know all the right phrases to say so people think that they know, because you're tired of people questioning you and being involved versus just having that true connection. It's exhausting. And I've talked with a lot of people, and I've worked and I've sat across from a lot of people, friends and professionally, and keeping it together is harder than just living in that life where you just kind of like getting into the depths. Like, that's hard, but it's hard to kind of live in that dual life.
Yeah, it's exhausting. I've been there, done that. So it's not, it was one of those situations where I'm like, it just has always stuck with me. And I thought, I need to be more open about my struggles, and hopefully that will let people know that they're not alone, and that they do have value, and that they're here for a reason. And no matter how many times I can say that and say, like, I've been there, we've all been there, right? That you can relate. It makes people not feel so alone. Talk a little bit about the Remembrance Rally every September.
September is National Suicide Awareness Prevention Month. Okay. And during that month, we always have our Suicide Awareness Remembrance Rally. And at that rally, we remember the people that we have lost the previous year. And and provides support and just a safe little space for people to grieve and to kind of come together and support each other. We put out, it's usually a Diamond Park, and we put out a pair of shoes for each person we lost the year before, which I think is a great, because when you hear 35 people, it seems like a lot, but you're kind of like, okay, 35. But when you see like 35 pairs of shoes, it shows you just how many people that is. And then we have speakers. So we either have speakers who have lost a loved one to suicide or who have struggled with suicidal ideation or suicide. Maybe they've attempted suicide before, to share their experiences, to raise awareness, provide hope, especially the people who have, struggled with suicidal thoughts, or maybe they've attempted suicide, like seeing them get up and like share their story and wanting to be there to give hope to others is awesome. And then we usually do an activity. It's one of the women who works at the Butler County Crisis Department usually runs it, and it's involving leaving messages of hope for people, and then they get hung up in the crisis department. So you can walk into crisis like Monday through Friday business hours. So when someone comes in, they can see all of the years of the messages of hope, which I love that.
It's really cool. Site.
Yeah. So, and it's only, the rally probably only lasts maybe an hour. It's very short. It's very informal. And we've had more people coming over the years. Because we don't have any way, when we get the statistics from the coroner, we don't have any identifying information. So we have no way of like inviting their family. So we just have to really get the word out that it's happening and hope that people see it. And we have had people come and like their loved one is a pair of shoes. So the word does get out. And we have someone right now, she came last year, she lost someone, and now she's like coming to the meetings. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's awesome that, she made connections and she's trying to get involved, because a lot of the stories from people, and I guess this kind of goes back to the support group too, is a lot of the suicide loss survivors, someone who's lost a loved one, when they say because I ask them if they want to speak, I like put out, usually I start very early and I'm like, does anyone know anyone who might want to speak? Usually all of them say like, I want people to know about this so it doesn't happen to somebody else. Like, or this is how I'm like keeping, my child's memory alive. That is what I think kind of fuels the survivors of loss with getting involved, is that's their way of remembering their loved one, and then like letting people know like this is something that happens and it can happen to anyone, like it happened to them. So I think that helps get the word out, and also lets people know that like this is something happening and it could be happening and you don't even know about it.
Yeah. So anything that you would like to close with, say that maybe you feel like you haven't said yet, and we'll start with Dawn.
A lot of things. Just kidding. Kidding, but not, right? I think one of the things that we talk about that I really, as we're talking about statistics and adolescents and kids, just at Glade Run last year, we serviced over 2,000 kids in the school districts that we're in. And that's the ones that were in the school physically helping, not including how many are receiving services outside with other providers or with us. And so that's the biggest thing, is helping families and kids and school districts and the community, right? It takes a village. It's so important. And I love the school-based model because of the fact that you can get therapy right there in the middle of the day. The kid doesn't have to, miss piano practice, or mom and dad have a million things, or maybe mom works night shift and she just can't get the kid to therapy. Whatever the circumstances are, it helps to integrate it right there. And a lot of the things that the kids are experiencing are at home, but also in the school setting, the bullying, the social media, the pressures we're getting into school. I mean, really right now in middle school, kids are talking about college. Like it's insane, but that's the pressure that they're under right now. And so when things are happening in the school right then and there, we can address it as it's kind of almost happening. And so we're strategic, right, about when we're pulling kids and when we're meeting with them throughout their day. But it's a really beautiful model and the success and how that happens. And we can still get family involved. You can still have family therapy. But it's a really cool way to address it right then and there, not put more pressure on the family, and provide the services. And we work with the schools, right? We connect with them. How do you push it back into the classroom? Because one of the things that I was, working on is my TCIT, which is working with teachers actually on those behavior management. And you have kids who are externalizing their behaviors, and you have 20 kids in the classroom. Like, what do I do with this? Like, it's feeding into this room right now. And so helping to help manage some of those things through positive reinforcement and how to mitigate some of those things proactively. So it transfers right back into the classroom, and that helps the school district, the classrooms, to become more healthy in the mental health awareness. Because we all have physical health. We all have mental health. It's just creating healthy mental health. And I think that's the thing people often think, you have mental health. Yeah, we all do. Right. We all do, actually. Surprise. I don't know if you knew that or not, but we all have mental health. It's about being healthy. And it's just having it so you can manage it, right? And how to be appropriately working through some of those things. So for me, like that school-based thing, as we talk about working with kids right from the very beginning and early on, it is just so vital. And we're in we're in 5 different school districts right now, just in Butler County alone, including the Head Start programs. But we're in 6 different counties providing school-based services with Glade Run, and that does include other providers who are doing the same thing or providing things we do it in the clinic. Families, maybe they want more discreet. That's fine. We have that available to you, as well as our other services, going in the home and supporting. But the help, right, and being okay with saying like, yeah, we have a mental health problem. And some of the school districts right now, unfortunately, they're not on board. Not necessarily with us having therapy in the school. It's just we want to keep a community stigma, right? We don't want to have that, like, we don't have mental health, but yeah, you do, and it's a problem. And if we're not working through these things, we're gonna have a bigger problem on our hand because it's not going away. And it's what fires me up, right? In a good way. Like I just want to help. And, we're always looking at, school approaches us and says like, hey, can we get some service in there? Like, well, let's figure it out. Let's be creative. And it's not a one size fit all, right? Like just like any other therapy, you're sitting across from somebody one-on-one. We're never doing the same thing. If I were to meet with Amy and then I was meeting with you, Laura, like we're not going to have the exact same conversation. If you came from the same walks of life. It's the same thing in the school districts. Like we provide the general therapy, but we have some school districts that want like a mindfulness room. We do it. You want a more intensive model, pushing into classroom? We'll do it, because that's what your school needs. That's what your specific population needs. And it's just so vital. And I don't know, I'm here for it because I think it's so important, because as we talk about adults who are completing suicide and where that comes from, again, when we look back at where did this start? Mm-hmm. For the most part, adults who are using drugs and alcohol have extreme mental health circumstances or impairments or suicide ideation. It didn't just start yesterday. No. It started from a sequence of events that happened in childhood, and that's one of the big keys, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't know that I think it's just really important to talk about that.
Okay.
I guess I just want to talk about maybe scheduling QPR trainings. They're free. They're usually about 2 hours, and we come to you to do the training. So if you like a mental health organization, any organization like a church group or a community group, anything like that, anyone, we've had them all over. We've had them at the senior centers. We did one with some Concordia staff. We've had them at, I think, Karnes City and Knox School District had them. Like, we can come to you and we can make it work with your schedule to come out and do a QPR training. And you learn everything we talked about. Again, how to ask someone, how to recognize the signs, how to get them referred to resources. And a lot of time, because I think I've done some I've spoken at a couple community groups, and a lot of people don't even realize we have like a Butler County crisis line, which like in our world, in the mental health, of course we know that. And we think everyone knows that because everyone we know does, but they don't. Yeah. Right. They don't.
And you can text now, which is,
yes,
people don't know that.
You can text. There's the 988 number. So I think it's important to just get people, not just to raise awareness, but to teach people about these resources, what to do if they're concerned about a loved one. So like, we will come and do a QPR with you. you can call me at Human Services, at Butler County Human Services. We have an email address. It's youmatterbutler@gmail.com. You can email us and we can set something up.
I want to do one of those.
We would love to. We would love to. Yeah.
Honestly, we have like all of our support staff, like who may not be doing direct care, but we really say, okay, even if you're not doing the direct one-on-one with, you know, any of the clients and consumers we work with, you still need to have some type of training because at some point you're going to be interacting with a human being. Yeah. Right. You know, and I think that, and I think that's the other thing I was just going to say is like, I think it's really important for people to know, like, I see you. Like, I see you for who you are. Like, I see you walking down that street. I see you working hard as a mom. I see you working hard as, you know, professional. I see you struggling and just needing something in life. Like, and I think that's the messaging of like, and that's a big part of QPR is like, you don't have to be a professional. You have to do anything super fancy. It's like, I see you.
You don't have to have any sort of previous knowledge about mental health or suicide or anything. Like, it is geared towards someone who maybe has no experience with any of that. And there's always two people who do the training together. Yeah. So like, and you're welcome to ask questions. And during September, this past prevention month, we had a week where we did, instead of people calling us and us coming to them, we held 3 QPRs where like anyone could sign up. And so we're doing another one. It would be before this airs, but we want to start doing those more. So it's not so like, you know, if you are the only one here who wants that training, or you're not, or you're just someone listening to this and you don't have an organization or a group, like we want to start having more of the trainings where anyone can sign up. Just any community member who hears about it is welcome to come.
Can I thank you?
Oh, seriously, of course.
I do. I really want to thank you because when you called me, like, oh, Butler Eagle. Like, I mean, I've done interviews and different things, but like podcast, that's cool. That's unique. That's, you know, but what you were talking about and some of the conversations we had early on about like how this is your first thing doing this, right? You could have gone a different path. You could have been real easy with it, eased into it. Let's talk about the local businesses, you know, let's talk about your good new food shop, which are good, right? We want to promote businesses, but you're getting into the reality of what our community is about, you know, and it's not just our community, it's every community and what people face and the reality of like, this is what it is. So it takes guts. I'll use that word, but because I think I want to use more intense because it really does take that intensity to approach it. And there's probably some resistance along the way. I can't imagine, but I'm sure there were. But the fact that you're doing it and you're making it happen. And I'm looking at the board of like all these people. You've got some big players. Like I'm excited. There's people I've worked with in different pathways.
They've been deleted. Like the ones that have already gone out, I erased them so I can see the progress.
But I know some of the people that you've worked with, and there's some of them, you know, I've worked with in different paths, whether it's career or personal or whatever. And so for me, I'm like, I love it. I'm seeing it. And so thank you. So thank you for stepping up, doing the uncomfortable, and making other people uncomfortable, because that's where change happens. So I don't want to take over for you, but I think it's important to thank you for that.
No, I'm having a little bit of imposter syndrome in the last couple weeks. My personal life, my professional life, there's a lot of things going on right now and I'm feeling very overwhelmed. And I was a dancer. I danced professionally after college. And then I worked for 2 big fitness companies and it was like, I always had to be on. Yep. I always had to be perfect. I always had to prove something. And not that that's like, well, you have to prove something. No one said that to me. That was just, internal. Again, off of my experiences, right?
Yep.
And a lot of things that I didn't deal with. And in the last couple years, realizing like, oh, I have trauma.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's why I do that. And now in my experiences, I react in a way that some people are like, it's a little thrown off by it and they think I'm completely steady on my feet. I'm like, no, inside there's a lot going on inside where I'm having a little bit of anxiety because this is the first time I am reacting so calmly in a situation where normally I'd be freaking out. So
but you know what? Someone once told me you cannot be anxious in a calm body.
No, trust me.
Well, I was just going to say,
yoga, the meditation.
I'm going to challenge that.
Be calm. A true calm body. Like not like an internal, like, oh, I'm going to be here, but like a true calm body. Your nervous system is not going to allow that anxiety. You can have thoughts of anxiety, but you're not going to be physically
Giving us
anxious.
tips.
Yeah, I
Free counseling right there.
I meditate a lot. I mean, I'm a big meditation person. Yoga, like I right now I'm not teaching, but I was like it's the breathing, right? Vagus nerve, all of that deep breathing. It used to be the most annoying thing when someone's like, just breathe, and I'm like, I am breathing.
We're all breathing.
We're all breathing. And that was a joke with Alyssa and Crystal and I, where it's like, taking a deep breath and how that can be almost uncomfortable sometimes to do it in front of someone.
Oh, for
and
sure.
I don't know what that is. Like, why is that? But
because we think we're breathing wrong.
yeah, it's also this like, it's almost like a recognition of like, that you're freaking out and that you're in a very chaotic state. And so when someone tells you that, you're like, I am aware. Mm-hmm. I need to be able to like, I am very much like, I need to be able to figure it out because I'm the one that has to figure it out and deal with it and recognize it, right? And move through it. And so I get very stubborn in that sense where I don't want help. I have my therapist, and I've got my girls and my friends that I talk to, and I'm like, hey, and I just have them to listen. But it's in this whole journey that I've been on with this, it's a lot. Like I sit down and I talk to people and they tell me stuff and I'm like, wow, how did you get out of that? Like, even though I'm hearing the how and I'm hearing what they did, it's like, I know the things that I've been through. And people are like, how'd you do that? I'm like, I don't know. I did.
Just do it.
I just did.
It's called resiliency. And I know we're running short on time, but like, I think that's the big piece of it. And I had it written down, like even my notes can even just touch on is resiliency. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, I don't know, get back to where it's and it's a quote I've seen too. I like quotes. They're really good, but resiliency is making your pain serve your purpose.
Yeah, I've heard that. I love that.
And I think it's so important to think about that when, people think of resiliency. What does resiliency look like for you? And how are you resilient today? How are you going to be resilient in the future and having that future goal planning? That's what's allowed us to get through all the things that we've all been through. And everything's different for everybody. And our thresholds are a little bit different. And sometimes people don't really realize until you get to an experience what you actually, going back to like that 10% of like what you think is physical versus mental, what you are capable of getting through and having that right stuff in points and people and all that good stuff around what you can do. But it's resiliency. And that's what it comes down to. It's not like some magic skill set or, you heard this one thing or it's a person that got you through all of that. It's you taking the skills that people provide to you and being able to move forward and being able to grow and being able to adapt to that. And because when we talk about addiction, it's and like we talked on so many other levels, you and I, but also I've heard with all your other podcasts that you've been doing with everybody coming on, it's not linear. No. It's up and down. You have some periods of recovery and then you hit the trenches and then you come back up. That's because of resiliency. They learned a little bit and they made a little bit of improvement. I'm not going to do that again. And maybe they make some other mistake, but it's resiliency. That's what you keep getting up, putting your bootstraps on and growing, and that pain and that suffering, again, you make that serve what you want, your goals, your purpose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anytime I had a negative experience with someone and they'd say something negative to me, then I'm like, my brain, I didn't believe that about myself, whatever it was. There are a lot of times where I'm like, oh, that you're just adding fuel to my fire. Yeah. Like you just toss some kerosene on my fire. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to go over here and do it. Like, I'm just going to go this way. Yeah. Thank you for your opinion.
Right.
It was never in one ear, out the other. It didn't even go in the ear. It literally, I was just like I could just see the cannonball, like my brothers when we were younger, and they'd have these parties and these bonfires and they'd be throwing stuff in. They like burned my parents' furniture oh my gosh, at like a teenage party. The plastic furniture,
like all the couch in there.
The plastic,
watching it melt that your grandmother had from the 60s.
Yeah, they came home and my mom's like, "Where's the furniture?" And I was like standing there, and I'm the young one, right? So I'm considered the one that's telling the truth, and I'm being don't tell, and I'm like, well, they're gonna know it's gone. Like you didn't replace it.
Couch is gone,
and then they're gonna see bits of plastic in the fire pit, and they're gonna know. And they finally were just like, we burned it, we tossed it in the fire. And then there's like a why, and they're like, because we could, because we, you know,
Right.
so it's like this, whatever. Anyways, that was funny.
Yeah.
It was a funny experience because at least my parents thought it was funny. My mom was not happy.
Sure.
But my dad at the time he thought it was hilarious and was like, but also he thought it was hilarious because he's like, we can't change it, right? You can't go back and like, I'm not jumping in my DeLorean and going back and saving the patio furniture from Kmart, you know?
Right.
Like it's not the
Right.
end of the world.
Right.
This is a situation that doesn't warrant a freak out, you know?
But that's that support, right? That's like
Yeah.
parenting. Like you have to have boundaries, right? It's gonna be a
Yeah.
consequence, sure, but it's how we react to things
Yeah.
and how are we supporting people and saying like, hey, you know, talking about it. Like, why do you think that probably was not the best idea?
Yeah.
Like, what could have happened?
Yeah.
You know,
Being human.
yeah, you
And-
were
and-
curious.
yeah.
You know, kids are curious. Like, you know, it sets
They
us
are.
boundaries. You know, and
Yeah.
it helps us to have safeguards. Without boundaries, we become reckless. But with walls, we become really paralyzed.
We're ending with that. I was like, she's saying something right now that's going to be
It's getting there.
boom, music
wrap it
comes
up.
on. Yes! Dawn! Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to Alter Eagle. Join me every Monday for a new episode. This episode is brought to you by Butler County District Attorney Richard A. Goldinger, R.W. McDonald & Sons Incorporated, Robert Stevens Jewelers. Thank you to our sponsors for your support on our first season of the Alter Eagle podcast. Be sure to click the link in bio for your discount for BetterHelp Therapy online. 10% off your first month.
I just want to, like Dawn said, thank you for having us on, because we're both talking about topics that people are not super eager to talk about. They're like, especially suicide. It's really uncomfortable. People don't like talking about it, but it needs to be talked about. So thank you for giving us the opportunity. And I was also looking at the whiteboard of guests, and I was like, wow, she's getting everyone on here. So I think this is a really awesome opportunity for everyone to kind of come on and talk about these topics that are not usually talked about and probably people don't know much about, and so they can learn more from the podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and follow us on Instagram at Alter Eagle Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, stay kind.